The grid was designed to have a centralized power system distributing to smaller hubs, right? This doesn't work anymore in a world where the production is now distributed. And so the idea of consuming the electricity we produce locally at smaller scale is probably the next big thing. We are developing a solution to store the electricity for many hours up to days in order to mitigate that imbalance between the demand and the supply. So we take the excess electricity from solar panels, for example, we store it, and then when there is a strong demand, for example, in the evening, then we supply that electricity.
Simon, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. You are the co-founder of Shifted Energy. Today, I will put my investor cap and we will try and understand what you do and why it's positive both for the world, but also economically. We will dive into your product, the markets, and everything around it. Does that sound like a good agenda?
Perfect. Great. Happy
Cool.
to be there.
Before we start, two things I should say. First, listeners, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This takes 2 seconds, but really help the show. Second, thank you to Cambridge Consultant, part of Capgemini, and Climate Tech Supercluster for supporting this mini-series. I think you identified a problem and where the world is going from an electricity point of view. I'd love to start there. What's happening in the world when we think about electricity and the grid congestion challenges?
One thing is that there is an increasing demand in electricity. We know that this will probably double by 2050. So there is a huge need, and this is driven by the development of AI, but also the electrification of end uses. So there is this big demand happening in the future. We need to decarbonize the energy, and so we see more and more renewables developing. They are developing very fast at a really very fast pace. But there is a main problem, which is the grid. The grid hasn't changed much, and it is getting pretty quickly congested, meaning that we see more and more troubles to get a connection to the grid, for example, for new businesses. And this is a real struggle for our countries, developed countries. So it started with a paradox. When you think about it, we have all that clean electricity which is available, right, but cannot be transmitted from one place of production to the place of consumption.
That's something I want to stop on. We have enough we have a lot of clean energy. That is not so much of the issue anymore. Renewables are very cheap. So we know that we can scale that. And I'll let you continue, but I think that's something I want to stop on because the problem is not on the generation side anymore.
No, indeed. It's conveying this huge amount of electricity that we don't master exactly when it's going to be produced to where it is consumed. And there's a different pattern in the consumption, right? And so what's happening is that this electricity is sometimes in excess and is being curtailed, wasted. And at the same time, in the place of consumption, we have to turn gas peaking plants in order to provide that electricity. And so this is the paradox, which was really shocking to us and which was the start of Shifted.
That makes a lot of sense, which is super interesting because what we're saying there is we have lots of renewables, sometimes too much renewables. And as a result of having too much, we need to turn on gas fire plants, which is crazy to me. But anyway, when we think about, so that's electrification of the world, grid congestion. The other, I think, interesting part of your business, and we'll dive into it right after, is this idea of microgrid. So we used to live in a world where we had just one grid, and that's it. But because of new ways of creating energy, we are moving towards microgrid. I'm not quite confident with the topic and I'm not quite comfortable with it. So tell me about it. What is a microgrid?
Yeah, the problem, as I said, was that the grid it was designed to have a centralized power system distributing to smaller hubs, right? This doesn't work anymore in a world where the production is totally now distributed, right? And so the idea of consuming the electricity we produce locally at smaller scale this is probably the next big thing. And so these are the microgrids where you basically aggregate the production from, for example, a logistic platform that has solar panels on its roof. You other producers, like maybe residential. So you aggregate this production and then you distribute this electricity to different customers in the same area. And so, of course, to have those microgrids, you need electricity storage system, right, to mitigate the difference between the demand and the supply.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, before getting into that storage part, how big is the market for microgrid?
Yeah, so there are several studies showing that the market is expected to reach 135 billion euros by 2035. So that's quite a big market, and this is growing with double-digit number.
And does that include generation plus storage, like the entire value
Yes,
chain?
this is the entire value chain.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, okay, so that gives me great context for the conversation of today. We have lots of energy, lots of renewables. We need to be able to store it to reuse it later. And it's also coming through microgrid and not the central grid anymore. What are you doing to solve for that?
Yes. So basically, we are developing a solution to store the electricity for many hours up to days in order to mitigate that imbalance between the demand and the supply. So we take the excess electricity from solar panels, for example, we store it, and then when there is a strong demand, for example, in the evening, then we supply that electricity. We can do that, as I said, for a few hours, but also for a few days. If you think about, for example, the different pattern between the weekend and the week, right? You need to store for much longer. So these are examples, and our solution is providing that flexibility, long-term flexibility that are needed to have a stable grid.
How is it different to a battery?
Yeah, the difference to a battery is that a battery can do it. It can especially be good to answer for fast frequency response, like the first minutes you need in order to stabilize the grid. But then it becomes a bit expensive if you go over 8 hours typically. And then you need to find other solutions. And we are bringing that other solution. So we are complementary to batteries. We bring the many hours additional you need to this battery in order to have a system that really works independently from the grid or quasi independently from the grid. And we can also supply heat and cold, which is something that batteries cannot provide, and that can be useful, for example, for district heating or for industrial companies.
Well, I guess you have to tell me more exactly about the product. I have an image in front of me. So
Yeah.
for people on YouTube, I might put a small image, but it looks like a big container. That's what it looks like to me. What exactly happens inside that container?
Yes. So what we do, our product is an air battery, in short. So what we do is that we turn electricity into compressed air, and then we are able to take that compressed air into electricity again through a process I can describe. As we compress the air, we also produce heat that can be either stored or utilized for a tier customer. And when we do the generation, we expand the air, so we create cold that can also be used or that can be reheated with the heat that we have stored before to have high efficiency.
Do you need, stupid question, but do you need energy to then compress the air in the first place?
We take the excess electricity from renewables, right? That we store under the form of compressed air, and then we reproduce either electricity, heat, or cold. The average round-trip efficiency of such system, if we only produce electricity, is 60 to 70%, which for long-duration energy storage system is pretty good. If you compare with hydrogen, for example, or thermal batteries to electric, the efficiency is typically below 50%. So we are really like doubling the efficiency of such system with our system.
That's super interesting. So basically, you're saying that on average, for your competitors or like for other type of solutions, about half of what gets into the battery gets out.
Yes.
Wow, that's okay, fascinating. Um, so if we think about your use cases and your potential customer, I'd love also to dive into the technology, but let's first get to the customer side. So you have, seems like to me you have three use cases, purely the electricity one, heat and cold. How are you planning to develop the company? also maybe worth to say that you're an early stage company. You've raised about 800K so far. So, you're at the beginning of the story.
Yes, indeed. So we see immediate traction from communities willing to develop microgrids. And so we are already following, or we are part of several projects. And so we aim to sell our system there, because that would be, like a perfect use case and a perfect showcase of our solution, right? And so we will start from there and expand to other microgrids. Then we will increase the power of our system, because basically we'll start with a 100 kilowatt system, but the goal is to scale to megawatt scale.
With 100 kilowatts, if we compare to, let's say, I don't know, average consumption of one person of electricity, like how long do you
It's 10 times the power needed for example, for my family, for 5 people. I have a big family, but yeah, that's 10 times this. So that's a kind of a building with several offices, for example. That's typically that size. So that's a perfect way to start the business. And then going to megawatt scale, we can target the industries, and there. Indeed, there is electricity, but there is also applications where we supply heat, decarbonized heat, so low-grade heat that are needed, for example, for heating materials. We've had tractions with some companies that are looking at heating their materials. They have also solar panels, and they use a lot of electricity, and so they want to mitigate this and reduce their bill, basically, and decarbonize also their production. We've had traction also for cold, for example, with logistics warehouse, where they need to cool down their goods in order to keep them alive. And they also have a lot of solar panels on their roof, and this is a way to make best use of their asset.
When you say traction, are we talking letter of intent? Are we talking off-take agreement? Like what's
Yes. So we got a few letters of intent. So we got letters of intent for off-grid applications. One is a typical example is a mine that is not connected to the grid. They have solar panels to produce electricity that is needed for the mine. The problem is that they have a problem with batteries because of the high temperature. The batteries are not so efficient, and so they are looking at alternative solution to store for longer, and also with more robust, I would say. And so we got a letter of intent, typically from this developer, to build a pilot.
When we think about, and that's the obvious question, but when we think about the cost of storing energy, where do you place yourself? I mean, obviously you're at the earliest stages of your project, but where do you think you can go versus hydrogen and thermal battery and others?
So basically, the cost of the electricity we sell depends on many things. Of course, depends on the use case. But if we look at at systems, depends mostly on the efficiency and the capital expenses. A little bit the OpEx, but that's more like tier 3. So if we look at efficiency, as I said, we target 60 to 70%, which for long duration is pretty high, is really on the high end. And in terms of CapEx, since we haven't talked about the technical details, but we use a lot of off-the-shelf components, pumps, turbines, motors, generators. So we have a whole industry. The supply chain is known. We can reuse this and already start with low cost. So if we combine the two, low CapEx and pretty high efficiency, we are able to provide a low levelized cost of electricity, which is usually the metric. And what we target is typically between 50 and 100 euros per megawatt hour for the electricity that we will sell, depending on use case, of course. If we take hydrogen and thermal batteries, they have a pretty low efficiency, as I said, like 30-40%. So their levelized cost will be maybe closer to 200. I can't remember the numbers in details, but they would be higher. If we take lithium-ion batteries, they would be competitive, especially for below 8 hours, but above 6 to 8 hours, we start to outcompete them. And the longer we need to store, the better we will compete with batteries.
From a technology point of view, what is new in your process? Because I guess compressing air is something well known. Like, what are you doing specifically that makes you unique?
Sure. So if you take a typical compressor, they work adiabatically, meaning that they compress the air, they create very high temperature that is lost in the nature, And this is not efficient. They are not efficient. And we cannot use this for energy storage system. That would be a waste of electricity. So what we have developed is a system that can do the compression, keeping the temperature constant, right? And we do that with a proprietary heat exchanger that we have developed that is able to capture the heat in the air and transmit it in a medium to store the heat, which is the water. We use water to compress the air. And with our heat exchanger, we collect the heat, transfers it to the water. And this is something that is very efficient and very fast. So you can keep the system small while reaching high power.
I guess in terms of development so far, so as I said earlier, you've raised 800K, you went through Carbon 13, which I think they're doing quite well in the UK. But tell me more of the story. Where do you stand?
Yeah, so we have raised indeed, as you said, about 800 kilo euros. We did this with Carbon 13, with business angels and a few other investors. And we also got the support from BPI France, which was critical. And so with this funding, we are able to develop the IP on our heat exchanger, which, as you understood, is the main part, but also finding key partners for the next phase of our project, which is a 100 kilowatt prototype, so much bigger thing. And we are also developing a complete system to show the storage or generation of electricity. Low power at this stage, but it's really important to show the capacity of the system to do the storage and storage.
Do you have already partnerships secured to do that?
So we have several partnerships for now, mostly with R&D partners. So we work with the CEA on the heat exchanger, and also in the future on the high pressure test that we need to perform. We work with the École des Mines. They have a lab called CEEP that helps us to do run the simulations on our system and make sure that we will reach the right efficiency. We also work with the CNRS, the G2E lab, which is a lab in Grenoble, where our company is based. They have expertise, especially in microgrids and in, let's say, electricity conversion into electricity, which is very important because that's the use case, right? So all this makes a very strong team to make progress on our technology.
How soon can we see your batteries on a microgrid, do you think? Like a production scale?
I mean, first we want to do that prototype of 100 kilowatt that we intend to sell. And that will be like the showcase of our technology. We intend to do that at the end of 2027. That's our goal. Then we intend to sell several systems of that type, so like 100 kilowatt type. And in parallel of this, we will develop the megawatt scale. This will take a little bit longer. And so the goal would be to start the sales of this megawatt scale application, especially for industries, in 2029.
Maybe touching on a little bit of the funding story, who are the people working on this project with you?
Yeah, so we are a team of 3 co-founders. So I met my CTO, my co-founder, at a nuclear fusion startup called Renaissance Fusion. We were there and we immediately get along very well, and we started to discuss how to make faster impact maybe than fusion, which is a good thing, but which will take a bit of time, and we need to act immediately on the energy. And so we started to think about solutions. That was a few years ago. And then we were conscious that we were missing a third person with very creative skills, different skills that we can have. We are creative also in a way, but maybe different way. And so that's why we registered to that program called Carbon 13. Kudos to them, because thanks to us, we formed the team. We found that third co-founder. Her name is Monica. She's based in Frankfurt. So we are based in Grenoble and based in Frankfurt. From the start, we have this dual dimension, France, Germany, which is really useful because Germany is a very interesting country in terms of market, and France is really good to develop technologies and also get some funding and good partners for this. But that's how we met. So at Carbon 13, and immediately it worked really like great. I mean, we managed to go all along this process of venture builder process. And since then, it has been really a really great journey altogether. And now we are hiring the first person. Actually, he will start on Monday. So that will be
Nice.
our first non-co-founder employee. And we are looking at another person to join us. So that will be a team of 5 until the next fundraising.
Well, look, is there something that we didn't touch on?
No, I think we discussed everything. Maybe just I can tell a little bit more about the next fundraising, right? I don't know if we touched this point.
Happy to hear that.
So yeah, we are not fundraising right now, but we'll be fundraising. Our goal is to fundraise 2 million euro pre-seed round next year, ideally by June. And this is to build this famous prototype, 100 kilowatts, that will be used by a customer and that we will sell to a customer. So I know that your podcast is followed by many investors, and so I invite them to contact us. To know more about what we do.
For sure, and happy to do the introduction if needed. Look, thank you so much for stopping by. That was really insightful. I'll put the link to the company and to your LinkedIn in the description. And for people that are listening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you are on YouTube, or to give us a follow and a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Again, this really helps the show. Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you very much.